Hello. We're so excited to show you our native speech capabilities. Welcome back to the English journey. Today, we are talking about the most important thing you own, your health. My name is Anna, and I am here to guide you through the language of wellness.
And I am Abel. I am so glad to be here with you, Anna. Often we forget to talk about our health in English until we are at the doctor's office. Today, we want to talk about how to express how you feel and keep yourself strong.
That is such a true observation, Abel. You know, there is a very old and very wise saying in English. People say, health is wealth. And when you think about it carefully, that phrase is incredibly powerful because no matter how much money you have, no matter how many opportunities are in front of you, if your body is not well, you cannot enjoy any of it. Your health is the foundation that everything else in your life is built upon.
I love that phrase, Anna. Health is wealth. It is simple, but it carries so much meaning. And I think for English learners especially, being able to talk about your health is so important. I remember one time I had a terrible headache, and I was trying to explain it to my English-speaking colleague. I kept saying, "My head is bad. My head is very bad." And she looked at me with so much confusion on her face.
That is such a relatable story, Abel. And you know, it's not your fault at all. We're simply not taught this vocabulary early enough. We learn colors and numbers and greetings, but nobody teaches us how to say, I have a throbbing headache, or I feel a sharp pain on the left side of my head. These are the phrases that you actually need in real life. And today, we're going to change that for every single person listening to us right now.
Yes, and I'm really excited because this is a conversation that touches every single one of us. We all get sick sometimes. We all have good days and not so good days with our health. So let us start from the very beginning, Anna. Can you help us understand the difference between some very common illnesses? Because I know that many learners confuse a cold with the flu, and they also use the word fever in a way that is not always correct.
Absolutely. And this is one of the most common areas of confusion, not just for English learners, but even for native speakers sometimes. So let us break this down very carefully. A cold, which we sometimes call the common cold, is a viral infection that primarily affects your nose and your throat. The key word here is primarily. The symptoms of a cold are usually mild. You might have a runny nose, which means liquid is coming from your nose. You might have a stuffy nose, which means your nose feels blocked and it is difficult to breathe through it. You might sneeze frequently. You might have a mild sore throat, and you might feel a little tired. But generally, a cold does not stop you from functioning. You can still go to work, you can still do your daily activities, even if you feel a little uncomfortable.
That is a great description. So a cold is uncomfortable but manageable. And what about the flu? Because I know the flu sounds similar, but it feels very different.
You are exactly right, Abel. The flu, which is short for influenza, is a much more serious illness. And one of the best ways I've ever heard it described is this. Imagine someone offers you $100 to get out of bed and walk across the street. If you have a cold, you will probably say yes and do it. If you have the flu, you will say no and pull the blanket over your head. That's how different the two feel. The flu hits you suddenly and with great force. You will experience a high fever, which can reach 39 or even 40 degrees Celsius. You will have severe body aches, meaning your muscles will feel sore and painful all over your body. You will experience extreme fatigue, which is a more formal word for tiredness. You might have chills, which means your body feels cold and you shiver even when the room is warm, and you will often have a headache that feels very intense.
Wow, that example with the $100 is so memorable. I'll never forget the difference between a cold and the flu now. But I want to ask about fever specifically, because I've heard people say, I have a fever, and also, I have a temperature. Are these the same thing?
This is such a great question. In everyday English, people use both expressions, and they generally mean the same thing. When someone says, I have a fever, they mean their body temperature is higher than normal. The normal human body temperature is approximately 37 degrees Celsius, or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. When your temperature rises above that, your body is telling you that it's fighting an infection. A low-grade fever might be 37.5 or 38 degrees. A high fever would be anything above 39 degrees. Now, I have a temperature is a slightly informal way of saying the same thing. It's used very commonly in British English, so if a British person says, "Oh, she has a temperature," they mean she has a fever.
That is so helpful. And I want to practice using these in sentences because I think the vocabulary is one thing, but knowing how to put it into a real conversation is another. So how would I describe my symptoms to a doctor if I had the flu?
That's a perfect transition, Abel, because describing your symptoms clearly is one of the most practical skills you will ever need in English. Let's think about this like a small script you can follow. When you see a doctor, they will almost always ask you the same opening question: what brings you in today? Or what seems to be the problem? And from that point, you want to be as specific as possible. You might say, I've been feeling unwell for about 3 days. The phrase, I've been feeling, uses the present perfect continuous tense, and it's very natural here because the illness started in the past and is continuing now. You can then add details like, I have a high fever, my body aches all over, and I have a persistent cough. Persistent means it doesn't go away, it keeps coming back.
I really like that structure. Start with how long you've been feeling this way and then list the symptoms one by one. It's organized and clear. But what if the pain is in a specific location? How do I describe where it hurts?
Excellent point. Doctors need to know the location, the intensity, and the quality of the pain. Location is straightforward. You say, I have a pain in my lower back, or I feel a pressure in my chest, or I have a sharp pain behind my right eye. Intensity is about how strong the pain is, and doctors often ask you to rate your pain on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being very mild and 10 being the worst pain you can imagine. And quality is about what kind of pain it is. This is where English has some very specific and descriptive vocabulary. A sharp pain feels like a knife or a needle. A dull pain is a low, steady, constant discomfort that's not intense, but never fully goes away. A throbbing pain has a pulse to it. It comes and goes in waves, often synchronized with your heartbeat. A burning pain feels like heat or fire on the skin or inside the body. A stabbing pain is sudden, intense, and feels like being pierced.
These descriptive words will help your doctor understand your condition so much more clearly. I had no idea there were so many different words for pain. In my language, we often just say, it hurts here. But in English, you can paint such a detailed picture of exactly what you're experiencing. That's actually quite beautiful, even though we're talking about pain.
You described it perfectly. Language is a tool for precision, and nowhere is precision more important than when we're talking about our bodies and our health. Now, I want to move our conversation towards something that I feel very passionately about, and that is prevention. Because while it's essential to know how to describe illness, it's even more powerful to know how to prevent it. Let's talk about the 3 pillars of physical health: nutrition, exercise, and sleep. These 3 things work together like a triangle. If one side of the triangle is weak, the whole structure becomes unstable.
I love that metaphor of the triangle. So let's start with nutrition. What are some key English phrases and concepts around eating for health?
When we talk about nutrition in English, there are several important terms to understand. The word nutrition itself refers to the process of consuming and using food for growth, energy, and the repair of body tissues. When someone says a food is nutritious, they mean it is rich in beneficial nutrients. Nutrients are the substances in food that your body uses to function properly. These include carbohydrates, which give you energy, proteins, which help your muscles grow and repair, fats, which support brain function and hormone production, vitamins and minerals, which regulate hundreds of processes in your body, and fiber, which supports your digestive system. A balanced diet means you are eating appropriate amounts of all of these nutrients every day. People in English also commonly talk about eating whole foods, which means foods that are as close to their natural state as possible, like vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, and lean proteins.
And what about the opposite? What do we call foods that are not good for us?
We have several expressions for this. You might hear the phrase junk food, which refers to foods that are high in calories, sugar, salt, and unhealthy fats, but low in actual nutritional value. Think of fast food burgers, potato chips, and sugary sodas. We also use the phrase processed food, which means food that has been significantly altered from its natural state through industrial methods. And people often talk about empty calories, which is a wonderful phrase because it describes food that gives you energy in the form of calories, but provides very little nutritional benefit. A can of soda, for example, might have 150 calories, but zero vitamins, zero fiber, and zero protein. Those are empty calories.
That phrase, empty calories, is so descriptive. You can almost feel what it means just from the words themselves. Now let us talk about exercise, because I know that is something many people struggle to maintain consistently.
Exercise is such a rich topic in terms of English vocabulary as well as health benefits. First, let us talk about some common ways English speakers describe their exercise habits. You might hear someone say, I work out at the gym 3 times a week. To work out means to do physical exercise, usually structured exercise. You might also hear, I go for a run every morning, or I do yoga in the evenings, or I take a long walk after dinner. These are all ways of saying you engage in regular physical activity. Now, why is exercise so important for health? Regular physical activity strengthens your cardiovascular system, which is your heart and blood vessels. It improves your lung capacity. It builds and maintains muscle mass. It helps regulate your blood sugar levels. It boosts your immune system, meaning it makes your body better at fighting off infections. And it also releases chemicals in your brain called endorphins, which are sometimes called the feel-good hormones because they naturally elevate your mood.
Endorphins. I've heard that word before, but I wasn't sure what it meant. So when people say exercise makes you feel happy, that's actually a biological reality, not just motivation.
Exactly right. It's not just positive thinking, it's science. And this brings me to something I find incredibly important to discuss, which is mental well-being, because your mental health and your physical health are deeply, deeply connected. They're not separate systems. They influence each other constantly. When you're under a great deal of stress, your body produces a hormone called cortisol. Small amounts of cortisol are helpful because they help you respond to challenges. But chronic stress, meaning stress that continues for a long time without relief, leads to chronically elevated cortisol levels. And that can weaken your immune system, disrupt your sleep, cause weight gain, and increase your risk of heart disease.
That's really sobering to think about. I think many of us, especially people who are working hard to learn a new language, experience a lot of stress. There's the pressure of not understanding, the frustration of making mistakes, the exhaustion of constantly thinking in another language. How do English speakers talk about stress and mental health?
This is such an important area of vocabulary, and I'm glad you connected it to language learning because it's absolutely relevant. When someone is under a lot of pressure, they might say, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Overwhelmed means that there is so much happening or so many demands on you that you can't cope with it all. Someone might also say, I'm burned out, which is an informal but very widely used expression that describes a state of complete mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion, usually caused by prolonged stress or overwork. People also say, I'm stressed out, or I'm anxious, or I'm running on empty, which is a beautiful idiomatic expression that compares a person to a car that has almost no fuel left. It means you've given everything you have, and there's nothing left in reserve.
Running on empty. That's such a vivid expression. I've absolutely felt that way before, especially during difficult periods of study. And I think when you feel that way, the most important thing is to rest and recharge. Can we talk about sleep for a moment, Anna? Because I know sleep is something many people underestimate.
Oh, Abel, I could talk about sleep for an entire episode on its own, because the science of sleep is genuinely fascinating and also deeply misunderstood. Many people in modern society wear their lack of sleep almost like a badge of honor. They say things like, "Oh, I only need 4 hours of sleep. I am so productive." But the research is unambiguous. Most adults need between 7 and 9 hours of quality sleep every night to function optimally. During sleep, your body is doing incredible work. Your brain is consolidating memories, which means it is taking the information you learned during the day and organizing it into long-term storage. Your immune system is producing proteins called cytokines that help fight infection and inflammation. Your muscles are repairing themselves. Your hormones are being regulated. Sleep is not passive. Sleep is one of the most active and productive things your body does.
And what happens when we do not get enough sleep? I know from personal experience that it affects everything, but what are the specific effects?
When you are sleep deprived, which means you are not getting enough sleep, the effects are widespread. Your concentration suffers dramatically. Your reaction time slows down. Your emotional regulation weakens, meaning you become more irritable and more reactive to small problems. Your immune system becomes less effective, so you're more likely to catch a cold or the flu. Your metabolism is disrupted, which can contribute to weight gain. And over time, chronic sleep deprivation is linked to serious conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart disease. In English, we have a phrase for prioritizing sleep. We say, "I need to recharge." Just like a phone battery that runs out of power, human beings need a full recharge every single night to perform at their best the next day.
That analogy of the phone battery is perfect for modern life. Everyone understands a phone that needs charging. Now, Anna, I want to talk about something very practical, going to the doctor. Many of our listeners might need to visit a doctor in an English-speaking country, or they might watch English medical dramas and want to understand what is being said. What are the essential phrases for a doctor's appointment?
This is so practical and so necessary. Let us walk through a typical doctor's appointment from beginning to end. It all starts before you even enter the office. If you need to make an appointment by phone, you might say something like, "Hello, I would like to schedule an appointment with Dr. Johnson, please." Or you might say, "I'm calling because I have not been feeling well and I would like to see the doctor as soon as possible." The receptionist will usually ask for your name, your date of birth, and the reason for your visit. For the reason, you can keep it simple. "I have been experiencing chest pain," or "I have had a fever for several days," or "I think I might have a throat infection."
And then when you arrive and are called in to see the doctor, what happens? The doctor will introduce themselves and ask how they can help you. They might say, "So, what brings you in today?" Or "What can I do for you?" And then you describe your symptoms clearly using the vocabulary we discussed earlier. You describe the location of any pain, the quality of the pain, how long you have had the symptoms, and whether anything makes it better or worse. Doctors love that last question. Is there anything that makes the pain better or worse? For example, you might say, "The pain is worse when I breathe in deeply, but it gets a little better when I sit forward." These specific details help the doctor make an accurate diagnosis.
A diagnosis is the identification of the illness or condition after examining the patient and considering all the symptoms. And what about after the diagnosis? What kind of language comes next in the appointment? After the doctor makes a diagnosis, they will explain it to you and then discuss treatment options. You might hear phrases like, "I am going to prescribe you an antibiotic," which means the doctor is writing an official order for medication. You might hear, "I recommend you rest for the next few days," or "I would like you to come back in a week so we can see how you're progressing." If you don't understand something the doctor says, which can absolutely happen even for native speakers, it's completely acceptable and, in fact, very encouraged to say, "I'm sorry, could you explain that again in simpler terms?" Or, "Could you write that down for me, please?" Or, "I want to make sure I understand. Are you saying that I should avoid all physical activity for the next 2 weeks?" Asking clarifying questions is a sign of intelligence and responsibility, not weakness.
That is such an empowering message. And you know, Anna, this whole conversation is making me think about something quite profound. All of these health habits we're discussing, the good sleep, the nutrition, the exercise, the management of stress, they don't only help your body. I genuinely believe they help you learn English better as well. Is there a real connection there?
Abel, you have just opened up one of my favorite topics, and I am so glad you brought it up. Because yes, the connection is absolutely real, and it's backed by neuroscience. Let me explain this clearly. When you learn a language, you are actually changing the physical structure of your brain. You are forming new neural connections, which are pathways between brain cells. This process is called neuroplasticity, which is the brain's remarkable ability to reorganize itself and form new connections throughout your entire life. Now, here's the crucial part. Neuroplasticity is significantly enhanced by healthy habits. Sleep, as we discussed, is when your brain consolidates the new vocabulary and grammar structures you studied during the day. If you stay up very late studying and then sleep for only a few hours, you are actually undermining the learning process.
So studying and then sleeping properly is more effective than studying for twice as long without enough sleep.
That is exactly correct. The research strongly supports this. There have been studies where participants learned new words and then were divided into two groups. One group slept normally, and the other group was kept awake. When tested later, the group that slept showed significantly better retention of the new vocabulary. Sleep is not a break from learning. Sleep is an essential part of learning. And the same applies to exercise. Physical activity increases the production of a protein called BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This protein acts like fertilizer for your brain cells. It promotes the growth of new neurons and strengthens the connections between existing ones. Studies have consistently shown that people who exercise regularly demonstrate better memory, faster information processing, and greater cognitive flexibility.
So when I go for a walk or a run, I'm not just helping my heart, I'm also making my brain more ready to absorb new English vocabulary.
Precisely. And stress management plays an equally important role. When your cortisol levels are chronically elevated due to unmanaged stress, it actually physically damages certain parts of the brain, particularly the hippocampus, which is the region most responsible for forming and storing new memories. So, a stressed, sleep-deprived, sedentary person faces genuine neurological obstacles to language learning. Meanwhile, a person who is sleeping well, eating nutritiously, exercising regularly, and managing stress effectively has a brain that's operating in optimal conditions for the absorption and retention of a new language.
This is genuinely one of the most motivating things I have ever heard. Taking care of your health is not separate from your goal of learning English. It is actually part of it. Every good night of sleep is a study session. Every healthy meal is fuel for your brain. Every walk or workout is literally growing your capacity to learn. I think our listeners need to hear this again and really let it sink in.
And I want to add one more dimension to this, Abel, because we've talked about physical habits and brain science, but there's also the emotional dimension of health and language learning. When you're not well, when you're exhausted or anxious or in physical pain, your confidence suffers. And confidence is one of the most critical factors in language acquisition. Confident learners take more risks. They speak more. They try new words and phrases. They engage in conversations even when they're not 100% sure they will be correct. And that willingness to engage, to try, to experiment with the language is exactly what accelerates progress. A healthy body supports a confident mind, and a confident mind supports faster language learning.
You know, Anna, I came into this conversation thinking we were going to learn vocabulary about headaches and doctor's appointments. And we did learn all of that, but I'm leaving this conversation with something so much bigger. I feel like I've been given a completely new understanding of why health matters. It's not just about feeling good, it's about living fully, about being present, about being capable of pursuing everything you want in life, including becoming fluent in English.
And that's the most beautiful way I could have ever hoped for this conversation to land, Abel, because that's truly the message at the heart of everything we discussed today. When we say health is wealth, we don't just mean physical comfort. We mean the totality of your capacity to live, to connect, to grow, and to achieve. Your health is the platform upon which your entire life stands. Every vocabulary word we learn, every symptom we can now describe with precision, every healthy habit we understand a little more deeply, all of it contributes to a version of you that's stronger, more capable, more present, and more connected to the world around you.
To every person listening today, I want you to know that learning English and taking care of your health are not two separate journeys. They are one journey, and every step you take towards a healthier, more mindful life is also a step towards a richer, more confident relationship with this language and with the world.
And to you, our wonderful listener, remember that your health is not a destination you arrive at. It's a daily practice, a series of small, intentional choices, from drinking a glass of water to choosing sleep over one more episode, to stepping outside for 10 minutes of fresh air, and yes, to choosing to spend time learning and growing in a language that will open doors for you around the world.